However, this is happening. Certain strategies and certain actions have been recommended, and these actions have assumed that we can have one shoe fit all. As different countries, especially in the South, are experiencing the impacts of climate change, these countries are suffering these impacts differently depending on their context. Most of these countries are having huge debts, domestic and foreign debt. And this is happening. Most of them are affected in the way they are coping or they are addressing the issues of climate change. So as we think about the issues of climate change, time is of essence. The content of the actions is of essence. And the theme of this webinar is on the local, African local context. Some of the international actions, some of the international strategies have been in conflict or have not addressed the issues of climate change at the local level. And to add on that, even the way climate change is conceptualized, the way discourses on climate change are constructed, they're usually different at the local level. If we think about that local lady farming on a small scale lad, that old man grazing livestock in our pastoral regions, when you ask them to describe the climate change, their description is quite different from the description that are usually given in our international debates and international agenda. So in that case, there is need to realize that there is no blanket solutions to all countries, especially the global South. So we need to think about the solutions. We need to think about the actions that address the local needs, that address the local context, and that are based on the local circumstances. And as such, we need to come up with a strategy, think about the strategy, think about the actions that are in favor of the global South, rather than having the blanket solutions. So when we think about the issues that we are facing as global South, we are facing these issues despite that we are the least polluters, so to say. We have our own contribution to climate change, but in terms of the major causes of climate change, in terms of our contribution is so minimal. So and there are a number of actions, there are a number of strategies that have been adopted, such as activation of the loss and damage occasioned by the climate change, which have not been activated at the moment. And also we have different obligations, we have different promises by developed country towards the developing country or the global North. And these obligations have not been met. So the global South countries have continued to suffer the impacts of climate change, despite them contributing very little to it. When you think about countries like Kenya, we rely so much on rainfed agriculture and tourism, and fluctuations of changes in climate have been experienced in a difficult way. For example, when you think about this year, for those who have had an opportunity to go to our parks, most of the rivers in our parks have dried. And when the river, and since our tourism is nature-based tourism, we've had serious effects on our wildlife. So this, although this may not be directly linked to our tourism as we may think, but looking at the effects of climate change on our parks is likely to affect further the economy that is already facing problems of the debt. So as we think about the climate change, we should be asking ourselves, we want to become the global community, and there are global themes, there are global explanations of climate change, there are global strategies and action on climate change. We'll be asking ourselves, do we sacrifice the local interest against the international interest? What are our priorities? What are our needs? What are our policy preferences? Yes, we like to be the part of the global community, but do we sacrifice that, our local needs? And I think these are the questions that to be answering in this webinar. And when you think about the countries in the global south, what are our geopolitical power? What can we leverage on to drive our agenda home? When we think about our opinions, even in the global south, we don't have the common opinion, we don't have the common agenda on how we can negotiate our issues, we can negotiate our laws within the global discourse on climate change. So when you think about the issues, for example, on the greenhouse gases, what are our contributions? What are the contributions of the global north? And when you think about that, what comes to our mind is a global justice, climate justice. Who suffers what impacts and what are their contributions? So when we think through that, we are going to realize that there have been what we call the climate injustice, where those who suffer much are the ones who don't contribute much. So when we think about the global policies, are these policies addressing our local needs? Are these policies addressing our priorities? Are they in tandem with local circumstances? So the issues of the contextualization of the impacts of climate change comes harder. How does the context influence the way we engage with the climate change impacts? And in doing so, there is need to start thinking about how do we deal with the climate change as the global south? How do we deal with the climate change in the midst of the problems we're experiencing on our economic front? How do we deal with climate change, given that even the discourses on climate change varies from one region to the next, even within the global south? So under what framework can we address the issues of climate change in the global south in the local context? In the context of climate change, and thinking through about adopting different priority areas and action, how do that be a threat to the sovereignty of the independent nations of global south? And when we think about the local impacts versus the global impacts in fighting the climate change, so what are our priorities? Do we prioritize the international or the global policies on climate change in disregard of the local impacts? And when we think about the role of the global south, specifically Africa, in fighting in the fight against climate, what is our role? Our role just as spectators? Do we have a role? I believe we have a role, and in doing so, we will be addressing this webinar on a number of sub-themes, and we will be asking about the Kenyan's role on climate change agenda in Africa. Kenya is a player in the climate change issue, on climate issue, and in doing so, we will have a speaker who will be telling us about that. So when we think about the local versus international interest, what should come to fore? We are responsible to our citizens, but we are also responsible to the international community. So where should be our priority? We are also conscious about our Pan-Africanism. So are we going to be guided by our Pan-Africanism, that consciousness of being African and African being our business? So what does that protect our sovereignty, our independence? So as we think through the theme for today, those are the issues that we should be asking ourselves. And as we think about those issues, let's think about the essence of time. Remember that even the strategy that have been adopted since the issue of climate change came into the global front have been time-bound, time-embedded. So how do we work towards time? So time is of essence in addressing the issues of the content of the climate change. Time is of essence when we think about the impact that the climate change is causing to our people. And as we think through those issues, I would like to welcome all of you to the debate And hopefully, by the time that we will be through with this discussion, we will be able to have answered some of those issues, and we'll come up with a way forward on the way we can address the issues that are affecting us. And with those few remarks, I welcome all of you, and I open this meeting for deliberation. Thank you, and welcome to this second webinar organized by Kenyatta University and Leverage Africa Limited. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Thuo. Thank you so much for bringing out very key issues about what leverage do we have as Africa when it comes to our discussions. That we do not need blanket solutions. And I believe that this is what is our leverage to drive our opinion and what our priorities, our needs and interests. Thank you so much for opening our session. Right now, I would like to invite His Excellency, Dr. Wilber Ottichilo. Dr. Ottichilo is a current governor for Vihiga County. He obtained his doctorate in natural resource management and space science from University of Wageningen. Sorry, I hope I pronounced it well. And he was also the Director General for Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development, that is RCMRD. And I know Dr. Ottichilo is very passionate when it comes to climate change, on climate change matters. He's also very passionate when it comes to space sciences, and also when it comes to making of spatial plans. I believe that his county has made very big progress when it comes to within this country. So thank you very much for even honoring this invite. I know currently he's in South Africa attending the Pan-African Parliamentarian Summit, and thank you for taking time to be with us. Welcome. So, Daktari, you are on mute. You are on mute. Dr. Ottichilo, you are on mute.
Doctor, kindly activate your audio. Your audio is off. We don't hear you. Yes, turn on your audio kindly.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Now we hear you.
Yes, we can hear you, Your Excellency.
Good morning, everybody. First, I want to thank you for the invitation to participate in this very, very important discussion. And I want on onset to thank Professor Thuo for a very good introductory remarks. I also want to thank Patricia for organizing this webinar discussion on climate change. I am currently here in South Africa at the Pan-African Parliament. We are discussing the climate change and equity in Africa, and we have parliamentarians from all over Africa attending. And we are blessed this morning. We shall be addressed by our own President, His Excellency, Honorable William Ruto. Is already here, and he'll be addressing the conference around 11:12. I would like to start by saying that climate change is a challenge that is facing our planet today. And we have no choice but to find solutions on how to deal with this pandemic. We have had a lot of discussions on climate change for more than 3 or 4 decades. But it appears that we're spending more time on discussions, on conference of parties every year, but the outcome, particularly for the global south, is minimal or not even significant at all. So the issue, as Professor Thuo raised, how do we deal with this issue for us who are in the global south? And I want to note that this is an issue that was discussed extensively yesterday in this conference. And I'll be saying in my closing remarks what has transpired and what is likely to be the resolutions of this meeting we have here today. I don't want to say more about climate change in terms of its impact and so on, because I think most of us who are on this webinar understand a lot about climate change. What I would like to discuss is how has Kenya been involved in this debate, and where are we as a country, and what are we doing to deal with the issues to do with the climate change, and what is our role at the global level and particularly at the continental level. And that's why we are here, and as I've said, our president is here. So we are playing a very significant role, which I'll be covering later on. Climate change is a phenomenon that is well understood by scientists, by meteorologists, and when you look at the science of climate change, it's a very complex science, and many people don't understand. So from the onset, the challenge we have is even just trying to explain to the ordinary person, the ordinary people, even some of us who are literate, even as graduates, explain to them what climate change is. So that's one of the challenges we face, and particularly in the global south. When you go in the village and you want to explain what climate change is and what is happening, it's very difficult. But again, you discover, as I will talk later on, that the common people on the ground seem to understand climate change, but in their own way, but which has a very important significance in their livelihoods. So climate change affects different areas differently. So as it was as it was well articulated by Professor Dhuo, we need, as much as we need a global strategy, but this strategy will again change according to various localities or areas, depending on their climatic conditions, depending on their livelihood way of doing things, and so on and so on. Kenya has been a leader and continue to be a leader in climate change issues. And Kenya is among the first countries in Africa which was able to come up with a very well coordinated procedures on how to deal with climate change. And the first document that our country produced to deal with the climate change is the Kenya Climate Change Strategy paper, which was produced in 2009. And this was a document that I think was well articulate in the Copenhagen COP. And that formed the basis on which Kenya has been able to deal with climate change issues. And from that time, I was lucky, I was in Parliament. We took up the trouble or the procedure of coming up with a legal framework or a bill. And we came up with a bill which went through a very rigorous public participation and was passed in Parliament in 2013 before we broke for elections. But unfortunately, that bill was never assented to by the president. For one reason, there was the feeling that climate change was going to stifle economic development, in the sense that looking at the way we had put up the bill, we were addressing the issues of pollution, green gas emissions from factories, from various activities. And at that time, it was construed that passing that law would mean that there will be cartel, or all these production systems will be curtailed. And as a result of that, the late His Excellency Mwai Kibaki never signed or never assented that bill. Luckily enough, I was re-elected in 2013 and came back to Parliament, and we still brought that bill back to Parliament. And through a very long concerted effort, where we involved the government and everybody, we were able to have the government get on board and be able to support the bill. And the bill was officially assented to in 2016. So Kenya became one of the few countries in Africa to assent, to have a climate change bill. And I think it was a very progressive bill, and to date addresses many issues, except there's an issue which we didn't cover much, that was carbon markets, that were not, at that time, were not well developed. And it's an area that we are thinking through the Parliament to do an amendment to bring in the issue of carbon markets, which is becoming a very important subject. So at the national level, I would say, yes, we have done very well. Apart from, after that, we have had the climate change implementation plan for 2012 to 2017. We also did another one, 2018 to 2022. But the biggest challenge has been and remain is the implementation. We have had all these climate change implementation plans, well articulate, well framed in a manner to address many issues. But the issue here has been implementation. So the elephant in the room is implementation. How do we go about it? And particularly, I'll be discussing about our relationship with the international community and the global south. How do we link up, or how do we work together? But it's a $1 million question, which actually is even being discussed here this morning. So the challenge that we have had and we still remain with is the implementation, because climate change issues are long-term, and therefore we must have long-term solution, long-term strategies, and not, we may have short-term, but the most of the strategies must be long-term. And the issue, as clearly articulated earlier in the introductory remarks, is that Africa, and Kenya being one of them, we are the least polluters. We contribute, African in total, 2 to 3% of the global carbon emissions. So our contribution globally is minimal or is insignificant. But we are the ones who are suffering the biggest brunt of climate change. And therefore, we are caught in a catch-22 situation. We are the people who are contributing least, or we have contributed least to climate change, but we are the ones who are receiving the worst impacts of climate change. The unfortunate thing is that those who have caused this problem are not willing to support those who are most impacted. Those who have caused this problem are only ready. In fact, they are seeing climate change as a huge opportunity for investment. And therefore, they are looking at it as an investment opportunity. And that's why when you look at the Kyoto Protocol, they immediately found out that, in the Kyoto Protocol, they said, okay, this climate change is giving an opportunity to push technology, and now technology that will now be sold to the developing countries or the global south. So you found that, they came up with those green, clean mechanism, which meant that, you must be able to get those technologies and you must buy them. So the issue here is that they have stuck on mitigation rather than on adaptation. Because for them, they have the capacity to adapt to climate change, impacts. Where you have had several times, we have, hurricanes, and in US and in all these other places, Europe, heat waves, but they are able to deal with it. But for us here, when we have droughts, we have, floods, we do not have the capacity. So this is where the challenge is. And therefore, we need now to see, since we are the most impacted, but least prepared or least capable of doing much, what do we do? And this is where I think what Professor Thuo raised is very important. How do we deal with this matter, people from Global South? And this is where we must. And once we crack this issue, how the Global South or the people, the developing countries, if we come up with a strategy that can allow us be able to work together and come up with a strategy that will make us have a common front or a common position. Because you see, if when we go to all these negotiations, the COPs, we go there as countries. In Africa, we go there as each country. We have 53 countries. We go there in COP, climate change, COP, conference of parties as individuals. So we don't have a voice because we are individuals. So the first and the foremost, and that's what we are discussing here today, unless we come as a common front, unless we come, what is African Union doing? You see, for example, the European Union is a smaller union in terms of membership and in terms of even the size. They are able to articulate when they come to these meetings, they are talking as a European Union position on this matter is this. But for us, when we go to this meeting, we are saying, the way from South Africa, our position is this. From East Africa, our position is this. From West Africa, from North Africa. So we are fragmented. And therefore, that's why it's easy to deal with us. So until, and this is where, again, the issue, we must find out what is the role of African Union? Because I feel strongly that African Union has not played its role. And if we all came together in this matter, in this climate change discourse, and said any issue to deal with climate change in any of these COPs, let's take a unified position. And we go to these discussions and say, as African Union position, representing the 53 countries, our position is this. Then we have a voice. So that's one area that we need to think and see how best do we handle this matter. That's at a global level. But now we must come back home. While we have to craft a way on how to work together, the problem of climate change is there and is affecting us. What do we do in the meantime? I think, in my own considered opinion, each of our countries in the global south must prepare policy and legal framework on climate change and must incorporate in its development agenda climate change as a cross-cutting issue, because climate change virtually is affecting all the sectors of the economy. So the first shot is to have a policy and legal framework. Quite a number of African countries, they do not have legal and policy frameworks. So that's the first, so that we can incorporate that in our development planning agenda. We must budget, because if we wait, we were promised $100 billion in Copenhagen annually. None of those dollars have come. And after that, we have been promised, we were in Glasgow, we were promised, nothing came. And where there is any little money, the procedures of accessing to the money is more costly than getting the money. So you find that it's almost impossible to access to the money. But when it comes to programs that require to, let's say, market technology that is connected to climate change, then you find many of the developed countries are keen to support you. Many of these countries, including World Bank, they are willing to give us money, but on climate change, but as a loan. So you can see we are being even defranchised, we are even being disadvantaged more. Because when you go to the World Bank, they will say, okay, we will give you money, we will give you for climate change and so on, but it's a loan. Other countries are bilaterals. They also have taken the same route. They want to give the global south countries who are suffering support, but that support is in the form of a loan. And if it's in the form of a grant, they will not allow you to do what you want. They will dictate to you what they want you to do. And when you check, and you check many of these programs, when you check, you find most of them are only for capacity building. And then they will bring you the consultants who will do the capacity building for you. And after they have built capacity for you, they don't enable you now to implement. So you have been capacity built, but you don't have anything to do. So we find, Africa, we are caught up in a situation, unless we think out of the box and we jump out of this quagmire and say we must do things differently. I think we are just caught up. And we have been in this game for the last, we are going to COP28, meaning we have 28 years we have been just meeting. And they are very keen to give you money to go for conferences. So how long shall we continue discussing this matter? We know the science, we know everything. What is remaining is implementation. So let me go to what I think is we should do, and what we are doing. I'm very happy I'm spearheading this matter. After I left Parliament, I decided to become the governor, and I'm the governor of Vihiga County. And within the governance system, the 47 counties, we have a council of governors. And I want to say that we decided as a council of governors that climate change is affecting all our activities, all our development, socio-economic development activities. Therefore, we must mainstream climate change as a cross-cutting issue. So for the last 4 or 5 years, as Council of Governors, we agreed that let us not wait for these grants and handouts and money that we have been promised, which we have never seen. The national government has never seen this money, or that when they receive it, it's just in small bits. So we decided that in our budgeting process, let's put climate change as a directorate that has a budget. And how do you do that? What meant is that we had now to each county to put up a climate change policy and a climate change legislation. So as I'm talking now, out of the 47 counties, 45 have already done the policy and the climate and the policy and legislation. And in our legislation, we agreed that 1 to 3% of our total budget should go to climate change activities. And these kind of climate change activities must be mainstreamed to the lowest level, because this is where the impact of climate change is felt. So in our structure, in our governance structure, starts at the ward level. Ward is the smallest planning unit within the county government, where we have the MCA, the MCA as the leader. So at the ward level, we have climate change committees, ward climate change committees. Then we have at the county level, we have the county climate change committee. Then from there, we organize everything at now incorporating all the counties. And that's where we have a caucus within the Council of Governors. And this caucus is under a special program, a special committee called Environment and Climate Change. And currently I have been the chair of that committee for the last 2 years, and I'm still the chair. So we are coordinating this up to the ward level. And the key areas where we have done is up to now is public awareness has been able to be done. So if you go at the grassroots, we are able now to sensitize our local people what climate change is in their own language, in their own way. And we brought in the new explanation, but we have to incorporate their understanding first. Then from there, we have done, quite a number of counties have done climate change risk management assessment. So most of the counties right now, in Vihiga, we have already done, we have done climate change risk assessment, meaning each ward has a risk assessment map showing which are the key areas that need to be addressed. And from there, what we are planning to do, or what we are doing, is to start empowering, giving those committees funding at that local level to deal with those areas. And some of the areas we have seen, which most of the people are interested in, is in the area of water, because when we have droughts, we have a lot of problems with water. So water is a key issue. The energy is a key issue. Most people want to get into using renewable energy, solar energy. We have a lot of interest in conservation agriculture or smart agriculture. So that is the system we have put. And we think that is taking destiny in our own hands. As we deal with climate change at a local level in our own way, then we can be able to use that system to solicit or look for partners who can be able to support us, implement the projects. And the main projects we are more interested in is the projects on adaptation, on how to adapt to climate change, because adaptation is the key for the global south. So that is the type of arrangement we have for Kenya, and particularly for our counties. And I think most of you may remember we had the first climate change conference under Council of Governors in Makueni in 2021. And it was a very, very successful conference and gave out a framework on how we should deal with climate change at the local level. So I would like to say in a nutshell, we need to take the climate change agenda and debate to the grassroots, to the local level. That's where the problem is. But discussing the issues in conferences, in COPs, actually those COPs have become a tourism business. Actually, countries are still struggling to host because it's like a tourism business. You expect about 50,000 people coming to your city. You can imagine the type of economic impact in terms of expenditure. We were in Sharm el-Sheikh, very expensive place, but so yeah, I'm sure they made a kill. So these meetings, we people from South, we must say enough is enough. We have had enough of these COPs. We have had enough of these meetings in Bonn where we just wasting time. Let's now come to our senses. This pandemic is with us. This phenomenon is with us. And unless we deal with this, we are the ones who are going to die. Those guys there, they already have the coping mechanisms, which we don't have. We had just, floods in Malawi here and Mozambique the other day. You saw what happened. But we have had the same things in Europe. Do you hear anybody has died? So let's become pragmatic. Let's say we have had enough. You know, when you reach a level where you say now, I can't do anything. You now do whatever you can do with the means you have. So let us, we in the global South, let us talk with one voice and take one position in these discussions, in this global discussion. But meanwhile, let us come together ourselves and see how we can support each other. Like Kenya, we are already quite advanced in this. Let's support our other African countries to bring them to the level where we are. Let's open our economy. So that Africa, we can trade with ourselves. Then we will open ourselves in a situation whereby we will become a powerhouse. But right now we are not a powerhouse because we are operating as individuals. I think I want to stop there. If there are any questions, I can, they'll be asked and I'll be able to respond. But I think I want to stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Governor. That was a very informative session where we learned what is happening both at the country level, even at the local context, that is within our constituencies as well as the ward level. And one thing that has really stood out for me is when we talked about as Africa, some of these technologies that have been developed require certain forms of minerals, for example, from Africa. Is there a way we can get any form of leverage because we're moving from, and when it comes to the decomposition for some of these technologies, it takes actually a longer time than what we're dealing with. Is there leverage that we can have at that level of when it comes to extractive industries?
Well, we have quite a lot of technologies coming as a result of climate change. And the issue here is how we have to look at these technologies, because if you are not careful again, you become the test pig, where everything is tested or using you as an example. So what we need to do is look, if we are working together, if we are working together and we are able to get people who know those technologies or who are knowledgeable and they are able to advise. And that's why we need a general caucus or a general understanding on how we approach the whole issue. But yes, these technologies are there. Quite a number of them are very practical and they can be adopted. But we need a sort of a team or a consortium that looks at some of these technologies and says, yes, these have been tested and they can meet what our requirements are. So, technology is changing and is evolving very fast. So to the technology you have today, tomorrow is a different one. So yes, we need to be able to have a think tank, I would think so, that looks at this. And this can only be done when we are all come together and we have a sector that deals directly with the technology.
Thank you very much. Dr. Opinda?
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, His Excellency, the Governor, for the mind-boggling revelation of some of these things. One thing I would wish to ask, just as a point of clarity, as Council of Governors, do you have a framework for engagement with the local partners, especially the university, like the department where we come from, which has 2 programs, environmental planning and management, and also urban regional planning. And I'm asking this because we'd also wish to express interest later on how we can partner with the COG on issues of climate change. Now that you really said it again and again through the presentation, the need for us coming together. Maybe you can respond to that.
Thank you for that very important question. I'm very happy you have asked that. That's one area we have agreed in the Council of Governors, me being the chair, is that we must link up with our own universities. As climate change is a very complex subject, it's a subject that needs to be, information must be created, more innovations must come. Our respective counties, we have said they link up with their respective universities and be able even to set up, for example, our case, I have the Kaimos Friends University. We have already signed we are signing an agreement with them. From July, we are establishing a climate change center at Kaimos Friends University, so that we will be working with them as a Vihiga County. When it comes to research and innovation, that center will be carrying out that work. When it comes to training of our people and the training of our people, both the technical and the local people, they will be coming up with a curriculum, with the information. So yes, we have agreed as a Council of Governors that we need to incorporate in our local universities and institutions, because they are on the ground. They'll be able to generate information that we can use directly to solve the climate change challenges at the local level. So that's correct. We are doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Tugumisire?
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And I appreciate the hard work you've done in terms of policy and legislature to make climate change actual and real in governance in Kenya. Something I noticed in public policy and many laws, there is a tendency to either copy words or terminologies that are being used elsewhere already in Europe or America. And by the time, say, Europe or the West or the East coined these words, climate change, developed their policies, developed their laws, they already inspired those laws and policies with what I may use a soul or a kind of a belief system. Let me say a belief system. So, and it's so much that they push it more like a religion, if I may say, so that when people believe in it, there is something they believe either in terms of the threat is the world is going to burn up, or in terms of the answer, the solution, but they focus it on personal, their origins, interest, and needs, say, where they're coming from. So in Africa, I noticed that this thing lacks a soul. It's there, it's a body, it's like a bag, it's like plastic, but we don't feel it. And and the need for a policy to become, can I say, inspiring in the context of personal, more like personal, may need to come up with, and this is something I'm not, before I say may need to come up with, I would like to know if these policies that have been drafted and laws that have been drafted are very articulate on distinguishing the best word I could use, agenda normally helps capture the soul of a matter. Why are we doing this? And why are we doing this beyond the need or the problem? But in a sense of, for instance, self-reliance, in that, is there a capturing of the issue of how can climate change or climate defense become a solution for self-reliance? How can climate change become an instrument for profitability and economic development, so that we develop a strategy or a solution that we can sell to Europe to invest in, or to buy from our climate change solutions or products, or come to our universities and learn how we run what we run, because we have an export in this case. Or how can climate change become, not climate change, because the word change is now not very personal, but if we used climate defense or climate conservation or any climate reliance, maybe even change the term from climate change something else, but that makes the word caters for personal interest, the people involved, that they will benefit, because I notice also many leaders do not seem to advance or execute things where they don't see personal gain. And that's how, or it leads me to the point of, how do these laws distinguish globalization or globalist interests from patriotic interests? And if they have a patriotic interest, how profitable is that patriotic interest? Thank you.
Thank you for that very difficult but very searching question. I would like to say, yes, what you have said is correct. Quite a number of these policies have terminologies or jargons that are very difficult to understand. It's like medication. It's a terminology that not many people can understand, adaptation, all this. So I agree with you that most of these policies and legal frameworks have been formulated using these terminologies. But that's why for us at the Council of Governors, we said we want to go and do a more simpler legal framework and policy frameworks at a local level, whereby these frameworks are derived from the local public participation. So public participation has been in formulating our legal frameworks at local level was key. And if you read most of those legal frameworks that we have at the county level, they are very simple. They are written more or less in almost layman's language, and they capture the sentiments, the passion of the local people. So that is what we have been able to do, to localize. And that's where the universities become a very important partner in this agenda. If they can be able to carry out research at the local level, be able to domesticate these very complicated concepts and concepts and ideas into simpler local understanding, then it is something that we want to do. And that's why we are saying, let us not spend more time going to these conferences, because they are using the same terminologies. Those are the same terminology. And the more you go there, they are coming up with the new terminologies. So you are going there to get more terminologies, which are even confusing you more. So why don't you also get our own local terminologies by talking to our people who are at the local level, who are more affected? They will tell you there are even local terminologies that people are using, which they explain to them what they understand as climate change. And what is coming out is that climate change at a local level, people are seeing opportunities in it. So it's something that is, yes, it's a challenge, but it has a lot of opportunities. For example, almost 80% of our people in rural Africa, they use fuel wood as a source of energy. But with climate change, we can see we are bringing in new ideas of energy saving stoves. So like, for example, within our programs under the climate change investment programs at the local level, local people now are embracing energy saving stoves, which are using very, very little energy to cook, and they're saving the trees. People are going into now solar, solar drying. In fact, before, when we have a lot of, let's say, vegetables during the rain season, there's a lot of it. But because there's a lot, it just goes to waste. But right now, we have, like, for example, in my county, where groups of women are now able to use solar dryers to dry the vegetables and package them and sell them at any given time when they want. So as much as climate change has a lot of impacts, but the opportunities that they are bringing is more. By the way, we are seeing a situation, and I've seen this like in Kenya and particularly in my county, where we are moving from inorganic fertilizer to organic fertilizer. And this is something we did when I was a young person. I was taught in primary school on how to do compositing to make organic fertilizer. Now we are going back. So you see, we embrace the technology of inorganic fertilizer, which has spoiled our soils. So now people are going back through these climate change issues. Now people are realizing they can make their own organic fertilizer using the green biomass and all these things that come. Waste management. People have seen waste as waste, as the word says. But now, what is called waste is now becoming a resource. There's nothing now called waste. Everything we call waste is useful to something else. So waste management is becoming an issue. We are reaching a situation where people are saying this waste is my resource. You cannot take it. So the advantages that are coming with all this are also very interesting and will transform the way, again, people live and the way they look at life.
Thank you very much for that question. I think we will take about 2 more. I can see Amos.
Yes, thank you so much, Patricia, and thanks so much, Governor, for the great presentation. I think you have underscored almost everything from frameworks to the institutional challenges that we have on the continent. But when you are mentioning about Kenya being the first among many countries to come up with that Climate Change Act, and now we are looking at amendments, you mentioned something around markets.
Yes.
And I think, yeah, in as much as I agree that in Africa we need to mobilize much needed resources for us to be able to enable our communities and everyone who's faced with the climate crisis to build resilience. I don't know what your take is on the effectiveness of market mechanism in mobilizing the much needed resources for Africa and for Kenya in particular. I'm speaking of this because I think through the market mechanisms, we are just trying to transfer responsibilities from the polluters to Africa, of which we haven't contributed much to the problem. Don't you think with market mechanisms, we are selling our future to polluters, or will this be addressed in the amendments? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think the question you have raised is very pertinent and very, very tricky. Carbon markets have been and they remain very tricky and not very, straightforward. And you find that currently the people who are dealing in the climate markets are very limited and they have their own interests. And you find it's only companies that have come up who are doing these carbon markets. And therefore, you are very right. The way we deal with carbon markets must be well thought out, because you can still end up with having the carbon credits and therefore payments, but the polluters will continue polluting. So we'll end up almost doing nothing. So it's important that as we look at the carbon markets, we must be able to see who are we dealing with, which regulations are we following. We must have standardized regulations that will ensure that as you deal with these carbon markets, you at the same time ensuring that we are reducing emissions, because it will be of no use if somebody else is continuing polluting and you are buying by you probably planting more trees, but the process is still continuing on. So what we are saying is that we will not be able to reach the 1.5 degree Celsius requirement. Therefore, if you look at the IPCC report, it's showing that even with all the commitments we have made with our NDCs, we are not anywhere near. And as things go, looking by 2030, if anything, the temperatures could rise to 2 degrees or even more. So we have to look, and this is where we need a global and a unified approach. Like, for example, Global South. On this issue, we must have a unified approach so that we do not find this same market being used wrongly to actually not solve the problem we are trying to solve, but to aggravate the same problem. So I agree with you. Yes, it is a good market. It looks it's a good market, but we must see what are its long-term impacts and how do we deal with the impacts so that we minimize and we eventually achieve our final goal of reducing the rising temperatures.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I don't know how many more questions you can take. Let me give this opportunity to Asha. All right, if not Asha, Idlin.
Hello. Oh, hello. Thank you so much, Patricia. And thank you so much, His Excellency, Dr. Wilber, for that very interesting and very insightful.
We've lost you, Asha.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, can you repeat? We've lost you.
Yes, Patricia.
Repeat. You can ask your question. We lost you briefly.
Oh, okay. Mine is I'm just making a small comment. That's where my question coming from. When you look at the global carbon net zero 2050 agenda, whereby they're mostly focusing on climate mitigation, and as a result, the EU passed a resolution last year to halt the East African crude oil pipeline. So mine is, as we've seen that renewable energy, that the sun and wind have seemed to be very unreliable. And we haven't I've attended so many climate change conferences, but they never discuss. They don't have discussions on how unreliable renewable energy is. All they discuss is stop fossil fuels once and for all. But as Africa, have we asked ourselves this question? This is our opportune time to benefit from the fossil fuels through the ECOP, so as to develop the African continent and strengthen our adaptive capacity. So my question to His Excellency Dr. Wilber is, in the discussions they are having as the parliamentarians, are we discussing about the renewable energy flows? Are we do we have discussions on how unreliable it is? And as Africa, are we ready to completely stop the making of fossil fuels and rely on renewable energy? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. It's a very loaded question, and may not have an immediate answer. But what I want to say is that we in Africa, we have large resources of renewable energy, and we can be able to leverage on this energy and develop it more. We still have a lot of potential in Africa for hydro power. We have a lot of potential for renewable energy, particularly solar. And the technology in solar is improving very fast. And if you check, you see that the solar is now almost moving at almost 5 to 10% in terms of being adopted. So as these technologies improve, these renewable energies will be more reliable. For example, for us in Kenya, we have a lot of geothermal, which is sitting underground. And it's clean, green energy. We can use it. And it's not only in Kenya, quite a number of countries, particularly within the Rift Valley zone, have all this geothermal power. So yes, I agree that renewable energies, particularly wind, somehow has been unstable or is unstable. But with the increasing technology, it is eventually going to be stable. So as we undergo transition, and transition is usually a difficult period, you must you must let something go and get a new thing. So this transition from fossil energy to renewable energy is not going to be a short transition. It's going to be a long transition. But we should endeavor, we in Africa, we don't want to go into the pollution. We know that fossil energy is the one that has caused all these problems. Yes, we may have these resources here. So do we want to continue? Why don't we leverage on the new renewable energies so that we become the leader? Those guys became leaders in fossil energy and they developed okay. But why don't we now, for us, we become a leader in renewable energy? For example, Kenya, 90% of our energy is renewable. It's not fossil. So other countries can also strive to do the same. We have other energies that are coming, the green hydrogen energy. That is something that we can embrace, which, okay, may need some higher initial investment, but after that, the production would stabilize. So I do not have a straightforward answer, but what I want to say that yes, we are in transition. It will take some time to transit from fossil to renewable energy. But in the process, we in the global south, we have an opportunity to transit directly and very fast, rather than those in the north.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I can see that you'd like slightly gone a bit from the schedule. But one last question from Evelyn, and then I think we can go to the next. I think I will send you the questions much later. There are very many comments as well as questions. So the last question, Evelyn.
Thank you so much, His Excellency Dr. Wilber. My issue is I've realized that many a times Africa and all these other countries step up to what globalists have said. And my issue is this. We've just come out of a pandemic, that is COVID-19, which turns out to have been such a huge scam after 3 years of it affecting governments, it affecting our economies. It literally shut down the whole health, sector, and it was the main thing. It doesn't, and all the other diseases still existed, and they still killed people. But at the end of the day, COVID was spearheaded a bit above all the others. Same scenario is showing up with climate change. With Africa, I would want to find out, what is it that has changed about our climate that makes it such a huge deal in the past 20 years, let me say? What do we have? What is so significant that we can say this has showed up and it's new on our scene? And then second, don't we have other underlying factors that we should be focusing on, considering the fact that most governments have not even recovered from COVID-19? We still have an issue that was placed before us. We changed our policies, new laws were instituted, but after CDC, 3 years, CDC declares it like not what a pandemic to shake governments, yet it has already shaken governments. Policies have been instituted, laws have been amended, and they have not come back to change the situation at hand. We still have COVID-19 side effects in both laws, policies, and all this still underlying on our markets. Now climate change has come. As Africa, or as East Africa, do we have a recovery measures after all this is done? Because at the end of the day, I realized that usually the agenda goes beyond the face. So before we used COVID-19 as the face, now we are using climate change as the face that is before us. We as East Africa, or as leaders, because at the end of the day, it shall be not called upon you that in your time when you were in power, this happened, and these were laws that were instituted, and this is what remained behind. When all this is done, do we have recovery measures put in place just in case at the end of the day it turns out bigger than actually it is placed before us, considering that when the side effects are when it faces out, we shall remain with the laws in place and nothing will change. Case scenario, COVID-19, we still have masks in certain places still running even when they are not needed. We still have these policies which goes even beyond, because immunization, all that changed. Then the other bit, my last question is,
could you make it short? Thank you.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Let me be able to respond to what Evelyn has tried to raise. I said we are in transition and things keep on changing. The world is dynamic and there is no time things will be the same. In fact, the only constant in life is change. So change will continue. And as we face this pandemic like that, we faced the COVID-19 pandemic, I think we saw how the world can deal with a pandemic when it is threatening everybody. And we were able to deal with this pandemic because everybody was involved and focused. And that's why COVID-19 has been able to be brought to a minimum. And 2 weeks ago, it was declared now the world is safe of COVID. So equally the same, climate change can be handled if we all took a very unified position globally that we want to deal with this pandemic and forget everything, forget about economics. You remember during COVID, even air flights were canceled everywhere. Everything came to a standstill. We didn't care about the economy. We cared about taking control of COVID. equally the same we can be able to do for climate change. And we can have, already we have many strategies, or what I might say recovery strategies that are in place. And some of the strategies is how do we move away from fossil energy and go to other forms of energy. So that is a strategy that will need time to take. We have many other ways. How do we get more information? And that's why research and innovation is very important. Our universities must continually research because things are changing, and therefore we need more information. So I think we have to work together as a team. The recovery strategy or the mitigation measures must all be targeted, and they are long-term, because climate change is not something that is going to change tomorrow. It's going to be a long-term, probably 100, 200 years for us to resolve. But we can bring that period down if we choose the way we chose to deal with COVID-19, and we brought it, we control it within a very short period. So laws are also not static. Laws are amended. In fact, when I was in parliament, there are times we made a law, and after it being ascended, after 3 months, it is brought back for amendment. So yes, these laws, we will continually amend them as the need arises and as situations change. So in a nutshell, I would say we need to be open-minded, to be ready for change, and since change is a constant, and we will be able to move forward. I believe the climate change pandemic is something we can deal with if we all decide to do it. And that's why in the developed countries, yes, it's an issue, but it's something they are able to manage. It's us here in the global south that we cannot manage because we don't have adaptation mechanism, which we can build. So with that, I think I want to stop there so that I can go and join my president.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your time. It was very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Thank you so much for your time, and wishing you all the best in your discussions within the parliamentarian meeting and sessions. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Invite me again when you wish to hear me discuss on other issues.
Yes.
But climate change, many other issues we are dealing with, particularly we are very much interested in waste management, and I'll be very happy to discuss issues to do with waste management.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you.